Good evening. This is a public meeting, of the Lowell Zoning Board of Appeals for June 27, 2016. Tonight we have petitions under continuances and also new business. And before we get started, remind everyone if you could please turn off your electronic device. And second of all, if you plan on speaking on behalf of a petition, either for or against, before addressing the board, if you could sign in at the podium. And we're going to take the agenda slightly out of order this evening. So our first petition we'll entertain is ZB 2016-29. It's a special permit for Kang Realty Trust at 26 Wood Street. And the petition seeking special permit approval for the installation and internal illumination of signage for a recently renovated Dental Dreams under Section 6.3 of the City of Lowell zoning ordinance. Is there a representative for Wood Street? Oh, yeah.
My hearing aids are just, you'll forgive me, but I don't hear a lot of the proceedings, so I'll say my spiel and hope for the best.
Unfortunately, I can't use that excuse.
That
Okay.
better?
Yep, that's better. So I know previously you were here before us. I'll try to speak as loud as I can. And we received some updated drawings from the last time you were here. We also received some comments from the city. So could you please update us where we're at since our last meeting?
The original sign was 50 square feet of display and 20 feet in height. And it was located in the planting area that is on the site at the present time. Two things have occurred. And speaking with the planning department, they suggested that we reduce the size of the sign to 30 square feet as there is just one user in the building at the present time. So there was two reductions in the size of the sign. One in the height, it is down to 15 feet in height and 30 feet in display area. We moved the location of the sign about, if you're looking at the front of the building, about 20 feet to the right because of the angle of the front lot line. On one side, it starts at the back of the sidewalk. On the other side, it's about 3 feet in. So there's a bit of an angle. So what we did is we moved it down so we had sufficient space to put the sign and it would not interfere in any way with the 22-foot travel aisle for the parking. Also on the display, the planning department suggested that we use a reverse type display, so the background will be a solid color and the letters will be white. So that reduces the amount of light that is going to be generated out of the sign. That is about it. That's everything else has remained the same. It's Dental Dreams. They will be putting whatever display they want on. It'll be their logo and some other verbiage, but the sign is down to 30 square feet. Is there anything else?
So we did receive the new presentation you just spoke of, and this was dated on June 21st. So that's excuse me. That's the new plan we'll be going forward with, correct?
I'm sorry?
That'll be the new plan we're going forward with, what we received for the 21st, correct?
This is the way it'll be.
Yep. And
The wording, Dental Dreams has the option of wording whatever they want to word in there, but it would be a red, the top would be a blue background, 26 Wood Street,
Yep.
and the rest would be red with the white lettering.
Okay. Anything else you want to add before we move ahead?
The only thing on the thing that says that we're seeking a variance, I don't believe in this particular
Yeah,
case we would need a
that's
variance.
that's already been corrected.
Okay.
Yep.
That's it.
Okay, anyone here that'd like to speak in favor of this petition? In favor? In favor? Hearing none, that portion of public hearing is closed. Anyone like to speak in opposition? 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 Hearing none, that portion of public hearing is closed. I'd like to open it up to the board. Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have a copy of it, but Christine, did we get an email from the transportation engineer saying that he was okay with the location of the sign, the new location?
Yes.
Okay.
He said there was no issue with the access management, and the sign light wouldn't be an issue since oncoming traffic is coming the other way.
Okay, thanks. And through you to the petitioner, so are you, you just mentioned that Delta Dreams would do whatever they want with the bottom half of the sign. So you're saying that the drawing that you've given us where it says Mass Health and a phone number may not be what's on the sign?
This would be, I think this is pretty indicative of what they're going to put on it. I turned it over to their regional director, and they met with the sign people, and this is what they came up with. So I don't see that they'll change it.
No further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Pam?
I have no comments, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Dennis?
Through Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to say that I want to thank you for working successfully with the city here to address the location of the sign and the graphics to comply with a more compatible kind of design where we have the reduction in size and the location shifted over to provide the correct travel lane. So I think you've got a very successful design here, so thank you for working with us.
Thank you, Dennis. Gary?
No comments, Mr. Chairman.
Sean?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No questions or comments.
Okay. Well, I echo what Dennis just said, and I noticed the neighbor who was here for the first meeting had some issues about the illumination with his property. I don't see him here this evening. We didn't receive any communication from him that he had any further concerns. So that's good. And I guess for the record, we'll accept the June 21st submittal as part of the condition, and that should be it. Anybody else have any other comments, questions? Okay, hearing none, could I have a motion?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion for ZB 2016-29 for a special permit for 26 Wood Street with the condition that we accept the drawing submittal dated June 21st.
Could I have a second?
I second the motion.
Roll call.
Chairman Bailey?
Approved with condition.
Member McCarthy?
Approve with condition.
Member Perrin?
Approve with condition.
Member Peck?
Approve with conditions.
Member Palia?
Approved with condition.
Member Callahan?
Approve with conditions.
All right, sir, you've been approved.
Thank you very much.
Yep, thank you. Have a good evening. Okay, our next matter before us is ZB 2016-32. This is a special permit. Applicant is Gary De Los Santos, property located at 26 Andover Street. And the petition seeking special permit approval for the installation of 2 eternally illuminated signs for a new restaurant located at 26 Andover Street under section 6.3 of the City of Lowell zoning ordinance. Good evening, sir. Good to see you back.
Hello,
So for the record, if you can tell us who you are, please.
I am Michael Bromagem from Mike Signs.
Okay. So, as you know, you were here a couple of weeks ago, and
Yep.
we got that matter straightened out. So if you could tell the board exactly what the plan is, please.
The plans were to remove an existing sign that was up there, and it's a new tenant that's moving in there with a new business name. So the front would be, changed to the new business name. Then he would like to add an additional sign on the side of the building that, so you get a little bit better visibility when you're coming up to the location. And they're on the plans for you guys to see.
Great. There's another, there's also, is there 2 signs on the side of the building?
There's one sign on the side of the building, I believe.
And is there a banner hanging that says Jameson's on it?
There could have been, I'm not 100%
Okay.
sure right now. We
Well-
didn't make them a banner or anything, if there is one.
Well, I just want to make sure there's only one sign going up on the side of the building.
Yeah, it'll just be one sign on the side of the building, yes.
Okay. All right. And you haven't changed anything since the original submittal, correct? Yep.
Exactly, everything's
Okay.
the same.
Anything else you want to add?
Nope.
Okay. I'll open up to the public. Anyone here that likes to speak in favor of this petition? In favor? In favor? Hearing none, that portion of public hearing is closed. Anyone like to speak in opposition? 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 Hearing none, that portion of the public hearing is closed. I'd like to open the board. Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple questions for you again, Christine, because I realize this gentleman doesn't represent the business owner. So there is a sign on the, I guess, the west side of the building or south side of the building that says Jameson's on it. So can the planning office direct Mr. De Los Santos to remove the sign? Because it's not this gentleman's responsibility, but the sign is still there, so.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Second thing, I think, unfortunately, the signs have been illuminated before, prior to this application, so I guess if we could just also notify, not this gentleman, but the business owner himself, that he did not have permission to start illuminating the signs unless they were being tested, but I guess even if they were being tested, he shouldn't have been doing that. So, and I know this third matter isn't under our jurisdiction, but the back parking lot of the restaurant, there's piles of, it looks like construction debris there and trash, so there's no dumpster on site. If someone from, I guess, inspectional services would go out there, so. And they only have one city barrel and one city recycling bin. Is that an option for a restaurant of that size? I don't see how they would be able to dispose of food waste and other things with regular residential barrels.
You're right, it's a restaurant. If they had city trash, which they don't qualify for, they would need more than one barrel. So they do need to get a dumpster for the restaurant. And that is something that Development Services can direct the business owner to take care of.
Yeah, so I guess, again, I'm going to approve the sign, but these are all unrelated matters that just give a sort of a poor impression of how this new businessman is going to operate if there are all these other violations before the restaurant has even opened. So, all right. Thank you. Sorry, sir, no questions for you, but
No problem.
thanks.
Thank you, Mike. Van?
I have no comments, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Dennis?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to say that I think the sign package that we received is quite adequate, and I think the graphics work very well for the building, and I think you did a nice job. I agree that banner does need to be removed, and I don't like to see banners being put up. I understand that's something that isn't what you're here for, but something that I'd like to make a condition of the approval that the banner is removed. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Gary?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, can you tell us the hours of illumination?
It'll be set on a timer from when he opens, I don't know, maybe 4 o'clock or something. It'll probably be set, and then whatever his closing hours are, if it's 11 o'clock, it'll be, turned off whenever the restaurant's closed. I think it's 2 o'clock in the morning is when, if they were open, I don't think they're going to be open till then, but if they were, I believe that's the rule is, as soon as the restaurant closes, it has to be shut off. But
Okay.
it will be on a timer to shut it off. So when
Alright.
the restaurant's closed, it'll be shut off.
So would you be opposed to a condition 1 hour after closing?
Nope, that's fine.
Okay. Through you, Mr. Chairman, make a condition that illumination be shut 1 hour after closing. No further questions.
Okay, thank you. Sean?
I have no questions or comments, thank you.
Okay, well, I had the same questions and concerns, and since we've addressed all of those, I agree with Dennis. It's a nice package, and appreciate the inconvenience they had the first time you came in here, but I'm sure you understood why.
Yep.
So with that, any other comments, any of the board members? All right, could I get a motion, please?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion for ZB 2016-32 for a special permit for 26 Andover Street with the following two conditions: that the existing banner on the property be removed, and that the hours of illumination be, that the sign be shut off no more than 1 hour after closing.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Roll call?
Chairman Bailey?
Approved with conditions.
Member Perrin?
Approve with conditions.
Member McCarthy?
Approve with conditions.
Member Peck?
Approve of conditions.
Member Palia?
Approved with conditions.
Member Callahan?
Approve with conditions.
Okay, sir, been approved.
Thank
So
you.
best of luck, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, our next matter before us, still under continuances, ZB 2016-18. Petition is a special permit and variance. The applicant is Jeff Schembeckler, property located at 374 to 386 Chelmsford Street. And the petition seeking special permit and variance approval to expand and upgrade the existing Domino's Pizza to create additional parking spaces and a new drive-through window. The proposed project is located in the Regional Retail Zoning District and requires special permit approval from the Zoning Board under Article 12, Table of Uses, and variance approval from the Zoning Board under Section 6.14 of the Lowell zoning ordinance. Good evening, Ms. Flood.
Where would you want him to put the sign up? You just read it. All right, just for the record, James Flood, 549 Roger Street, Lowell, representing Jeff Schembeckler, who is the local franchisee for Domino's. Before you tonight for special permit, it's really a pickup window, but I guess they call it a drive-through window, and a variance from the parking requirements. As you're probably aware, Mr. Schembeckler did get approval from the planning board recently on a site plan that was presented, and what he's doing is he's adding a building of approximately 1,100 square feet to the existing Domino's restaurant at 374 Chelmsford Street to allow some space for customers to eat in. He's going to combine both the property at 374 and 386 Chelmsford Street into one, approximately 28,200 square feet for total. I was not involved in the hearing for site plan approval, but the engineer is here who can go through it to explain the project to you. I just get called in the last minute to handle the issue on the access easement for the residential property next door, which the law department said is proper, and they've approved it. So I'm going to turn it over to Jack. He can explain the project. We can answer any questions that you have.
Thank you.
Thank you. For the record, my name's Jack Sullivan. I'm owner of the Sullivan Engineering Group, and I'm the project engineer. I just wanted to elaborate on what Attorney Flood stated. This property is actually two existing lots of record. We'll be combining them into one. There's an existing curb cut that services the existing Domino's. We'll be adding an additional curb cut on the southerly side of this project. And as I say, this is an addition, so the total gross square footage of the building plus the addition is 2,342 square feet. When we submitted to the city departments, it was noted that this is considered a carry-out restaurant. Therefore, we're required, under the zoning bylaw, 47 parking spaces. We're proposing 36 parking spaces. 34 are conventional size spaces, 9 by 18, and then there'll be 2 handicap parking spaces, one van accessible and one standard handicap space. What we did want to note is on the addition, we're adding 34 seats, okay? So total seat count for the restaurant will be 7 tables, 4 seats per table, so that's 28, plus 6 counter spaces. We had a few hearings with the planning board. I've had some meetings with town staff, the city engineer, city planner, fire department. The majority of the planning board discussion was centered around access issues and fire department, fire safety. So the plan that you have in front of you is what came up with city staff and the planning board. It satisfied the fire department. We have a dedicated fire lane on the northerly portion of the site. And as you can see, on the southerly portion, we have an access and egress at the new proposed curb cut, and we're utilizing the existing curb cut for the drive-through, or we call it a pickup window. And I'll explain that in a minute. But out of that area, there'll be a dedicated left turn lane and a right turn lane. We had some good discussion with the planning board. This isn't like a typical McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's, where it's a drive-through where you're gonna see a lot of cars in queue. This is basically a pickup window, and what Domino's has done is they have a phone application where you put your order in, you go and sit in your car in one of these parking spaces, somehow that app queues you up when your pizza's ready, and you drive up to the window and pick it up. So this isn't something where you're gonna see 8 or 10 cars in a queue at a window. It's, even though it's classified as a drive-through, it's more a pickup window. You can see from the queue, we do have, we've accounted for about 3 cars. That would be the maximum you'd ever see. Typically, it'd be 1. But what we did also based on some of the staff comments, is if for some reason it got longer than 3 cars, 4 of the spaces that you can see that would be affected if the queue did back up are designated employee parking spaces only. So those are spaces where the general public, they would not be using them. They'd be designated with signage. There'd be employees in those spaces. Also in the area where we propose the dumpster and recycling bins, that's employee spaces. So those 8 spaces are totally dedicated to just employees, and that was really in case of any queuing issue, which we don't anticipate, and also for ease of if depending on when the dumpster and recycling bins get emptied. Don't know how much it applies to you, but we do show detailed landscaping plans, lighting, snow storage, things that usually the planning board's more concerned about, but I did want to note that we put a lot of effort into that. We have drainage. We're using a low-impact technology, porous pavement, and all other aspects of the zoning bylaw we meet as far as setbacks, lot coverage, building height. It's a 1-story addition to the building, and it's an existing 1-story Domino's on site now. I'll open it up to any questions if I missed anything or if I can clarify.
What's the date of the plan you're addressing?
The latest date is a revision date of April 27th, 2016.
Okay. So the changes that you did with the planning board, or what was approved with conditions, are those reflected on here at all? They're
No,
not, correct?
No.
So are you planning on providing another updated set of plans with?
Correct. And Attorney Flood showed me the conditions. Some of them are like an operation and maintenance plan. They want to see an easement through the property to access the 6-unit residential building. They're very minor. If the zoning board wants to condition their approval on those being met, we can. Well, obviously, we wanted to see how this went.
Yeah, because, for instance, you mentioned the dumpster.
Yep.
Now, when I went to the site, I saw where there were 2 dumpsters. They're straight in as soon as you pull in. Since I don't have a revised plan based on planning board review, where are the dumpsters going now?
Are you looking at the existing conditions plan or the proposed? There was talks of trying to slide the dumpster and recycling bins to the north. I haven't done that because we need to keep them 10 feet off the lot line, and I have to make sure I can do that. There was talk from the planning department trying to slide those dumpsters in a more northerly direction, but since we're on a zoning district divide, I need to maintain at least 10 feet to the abutting district, so there is some ability to slide those. I just haven't sat down with that to see how much ability. I'm not opposed to it. It's a good idea for the trash hauling companies, but I do have to make sure I maintain a 10-foot setback.
That was a condition too. We work with the planning department.
Right, and that was something we were gonna work not only with the dumpster location, but landscaping with the planning department, which we're open to.
Well, the only reason why I asked about the dumpsters is when you were talking about parking, I was just curious, were the dumpsters staying where they were, or are they being moved, and what impact did that have on parking? Did you lose
That's a
any
fair-
parking because of the dumpsters?
I won't lose any parking at all. In the area where you see the 4 spaces, it's gonna slide along that back curb line. They wanted me to move it more northerly, but we will not lose any parking because of it. They wanted me to try to kick it closer to that lot line, which I'm not opposed to. It's not gonna come forward, it's just gonna slide along those rear parking spaces.
So when the, well, okay, I don't want to get hung up on the dumpsters since that's already been reviewed by planning board, but the the flow of traffic is coming in on the new curb cut and circling around, is that?
Yep,
Okay.
correct.
So that's how the, I assume they are private haulers, right?
Correct.
Coming in?
Yep.
All right. Okay. Yeah, I was just curious. I knew we didn't have, at least to my knowledge, we didn't receive the new plans for June 16th, right? Okay. All right. Yeah, so I'm listening to what you're saying, but I'm not disputing. I was just wondering where everything was being moved to. Okay. All right, well, it may jog my memory for a few other things, but anything else you'd like to add at this point?
No, I'll open it up to any questions from the board.
Okay. I'll open it up to the public first, and we'll go to the
Okay.
board. All right. All right, anyone here that'd like to speak in favor of this petition? In favor? In favor? Hearing none, that portion of the public hearing is closed. Anyone like to speak in opposition? 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 Hearing none, that portion of the public hearing is closed. I'd like to open it up to the board. Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Mr. Sullivan, I appreciate you working with the planning office and the planning board to update the site plan. The lot where you're building the parking lot used to be, it was a wooded area, but it was also overgrown, and a lot of trash used to collect there, so it would be good to see it reused as part of this new restaurant. I have a couple of questions, and I unfortunately, because the owner isn't here, I don't know if you or maybe Attorney Flood can give us a little more detail about the driveway that was built to the residential property. We had received a note from planning that I believe the driveway was most likely illegally built, or at least built and then the backyard paved.
We got an opinion from the law department that essentially said it was a pre-existing, non-conforming access driveway, and their planning board condition was to have the applicant record an easement.
What happened, Mike, was that you've got a building, I think it's 368, that has no way to get in the back of the building. So he was allowing them to come in at the existing Domino's and park in the back of the building because there's no way you can get in there. So there was a question as whether it was a joint driveway, and really it isn't. So the law department did issue an opinion, which the planning department has, saying we can do it by way of an access easement. I prepared an access easement. I submitted it to the planning department. They submitted it to the law department. They've approved it. So they're going to allow the tenants in that building to go around this, just like everyone else, and go in the back of that building.
That was, I guess, going to be my follow-up question. I'm wondering, you know, human nature would suggest that the people that have been taking that left into the Domino's parking lot for the last 10, 15 years are going to continue to do that, even though it says exit only or do not enter. So I wonder if there'll
Well, is it-
be some way to manage that, so that, I guess if someone wants to get to their apartment or home, they need to drive in and all the way around the Domino's to the backside.
I think there's a big, well, a fire lane marking there. I don't know if there's anything on the ground that kind of prevents them from doing it. I mean, that was a concern that the planning board had too, but because of the fire department wanted it that way, that's the way they approved it.
I'm very happy with the fire lane. I mean, it made, originally, I think there were going to be parking spaces there, which would, or,
It was going to be a two-way out.
right.
They didn't
So the
want that.
original plan, the fire department was against. I know they approved the revised plan, so.
Go ahead. He knows more about it than I do.
Yeah, so your question's a good question. That came up at 2 planning board hearings. And we're trying everything we can do, like the fire lane is a dedicated lane that will be painted on the ground, it'll be posted. On the exit, there's gonna be do not enter, but can we control people coming in like you mentioned? Probably not. You know, like to enforce that, people tend to try to take the easiest ways, even if they're not legal all the time. And there was discussion about that. I think on our end, we've tried everything we can do to prevent that, but there's no guarantee on it.
I mean, other than closing off access to the rear of that apartment, I don't know if it's an apartment building or a multifamily,
And
but
that went around too, and with DPD staff, we talked about that. That would just force everyone back onto the street, which the city didn't want to see. So it was kind of, you know, we put them in, the reason the lot was created was to get them off the street, then we'd have to put them back on the street. Which isn't good for public safety or if you know, we have a bad winter trying to plow and deal with the streets and sidewalks. So this was vetted with the planning board, but it's a good point you bring up.
yeah, and I regret I wasn't able to watch the planning board meetings. Once I knew Attorney Flood would be here, I knew we would get a thorough explanation if we had any questions, so.
Yeah.
And that's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Van?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I appreciate the detailed plans. This applicant, this project makes sense to me. You know, they're expanding, they're growing, so they want to, you know, renovate and accommodate more customers for indoor dining and a drive-through window. You know, even though they don't have the required 48 parking spaces, I think 36 is adequate. So overall, I think this is something that I believe can be granted to. So overall, I think this is a pretty good project. So those are all the comments I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Dennis?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I have a question about signage. How does signage work on the site for traffic flow? You obviously have two-way traffic where the cars are parked, but then with the drive-in, it's one-way traffic. Is there signage on the plan indicating that?
There is signage on sheet 4 of 7 on the site plan. You can see on the plan, at the exit, there's a sign shown that says exit and do not enter, sign and post. And then we show signage on the entrance with an enter, sign and post,
I guess what I was looking for
and an
was,
exit, sign and post. So not only will we have signage, but the arrows that you see, those will be those will be painted as well. So there'll be signage and traffic markings painted.
okay.
If you're wondering about signage for the building, and that is being prepared, I will be submitting that probably within the next couple of weeks because a lot of the signs are internally illuminated. I sent them to Christine, she's looked at them, and I think it'll show the entrance and, you know, I think what you're looking for.
Okay. I'm just trying to think through the easement for the people using that property adjacent, and I guess there really isn't a problem with them turning one way or the other at that point, so I guess we don't need a sign there. So I was just trying to figure out that whole flow piece with the easement as well. And you mentioned the dumpsters sliding to the north. you're going to be adding additional pavement in order to do that?
No,
So then they'll actually be sliding to the north and to the west a bit, coming closer to the curb?
yeah,
Is that your
they'll
intent?
slide right along the back of the curb. The idea was, the location they're in now, they felt if they could slide a little more, it would give the truck a little more maneuverability to, if it's like a front-load machine, to get in.
I agree. I think that makes a lot of sense.
I may have to angle it slightly, so it sits on a concrete pad. My whole parking lot's porous pavement, so I don't have any sort of, even if I had to add a little extra concrete or something on the pad, it's not going to affect my drainage for the site. But I will try to slide that and probably rotate it slightly, just so, you know, ease
Easier
of-
access for the
Correct.
trucks. Yep. And then you're going to be modifying the landscape plan to resolve that final location, is that right?
Yes,
But you'd still be maintaining the 10-foot buffer.
I have to maintain a 10-foot buffer.
So there's plenty of room for the landscaping to,
The landscaping can be in the 10-foot buffer.
Right.
It's the
exactly.
edge of the travelway or the dumpster pad has to be. But I have detailed landscaping within that buffer, which is actually one of the requirements. We have to put in like evergreen plantings every so many feet high along that.
Oh, that'll be great. That'll be a nice improvement.
Yeah.
And then the parking that we're looking for the relief on, you've got 28 seats at tables and 6 at a, would you say, a bar or something?
That counter.
Counter,
There'll
yep.
be 6 seats at the
So
counter. and
total of 34.
Total of 34.
And you're designating, of that 34, 26 of those for the, is that right?
That's
For the
correct.
customers?
Correct.
So of the 34 seats, 26 car spaces are designated
Right.
for those 34 seats, which seems like a pretty good ratio.
Right, exactly. The architect had figured
Yeah,
13 cars max
right.
for our table seating. I don't know how he figured that, but that's what he sent me in an email, so we feel very comfortable. We thought we were oversized. Originally, we didn't
Right.
even think we had to come before the group, but then, before this board, but then, once it was deemed to carry out, it put us into a whole nother level. And
Got it.
I think the uniqueness of this application, it's not your typical drive-through, but and they really, you know, Domino's, most people take out, they don't go and eat there, but the owner suspects he might have like 30% of his sales
Sure.
for indoor seating. 70% will still be takeout.
It's a nice-looking facility,
Yeah.
quite attractive. Nice application.
Thank you.
It's very good. Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you, Dennis. Gary?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. Approximately how many employees will be in the facility?
Do you know that, Attorney Flood?
During all the shifts.
During the peak, we think we,
I think it was in the narrative that he submitted.
I think it was between 8 and, between 8, 12, okay, that's what I thought, yeah. Yeah, 8 to 10 employees, okay. Overall, it's a very well-detailed plan. You did a lot of due diligence in working with the planning department and being prepared before us. I think the walk-up, pickup / drive-through window is unique to Domino's. I've been by the site on several occasions, and I do agree that it is going to be highly qualified for a takeout, so I appreciate your detailed plans. No further questions.
thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Sean?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I share the same sentiments of my fellow board members. It's a very great project. It's very unique, and seeing Domino's, I mean, obviously, you think of Domino's, you think of delivery mostly, and this is going to be something very different setting. And I do like the idea of the takeout, walk-up, drive-through window, and I appreciate you working with DPD, and trying to put this project to where it's at, and I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so we received comments back from the city dated June 8th, and they reference to the April 27th drawings which you originally had submitted with planning board, which we have in front of us. And it's outlined here, some of the, I guess, proposed layout back in April, and then the changes. For instance, there were 4 parking spaces for employees, now you've changed that to 8. 2 parking spaces, proposed dumpster, you have 4 now. And I talk about the total number of parking spaces and the opinion of the DPD, even though you don't meet the requirement, it's their opinion that the delta between the two is sufficient based on the type of operation. So the queuing also says it was set up for 10 cars to queue, but now you said it's down to 3?
It could be as much as 10. If
Okay.
they go, that's why, to be safe, we had those 4 dedicated employee spaces.
Okay.
So if it did get to be 10 long, it's not going to impact the public
Yep.
coming in
Okay.
and out.
And you mentioned that at the beginning?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to assume Domino's isn't going to change their menu.
I don't think so. I like everything
If the
on it.
expectation is, you're assuming you got an app and you're quick in and out, I would assume they're not going to change into another operation, if you know what I'm saying.
I know what
I
you're
know you're
saying.
not the owner, but
Right,
if they change their menu and they got more items, then you might get 10 cars.
yeah.
So was that, Christine, just real quick, I'm assuming that was factored into like the traffic plan, even if they had 10 cars in the queue?
Yes. We felt that there was sufficient room for a lane and a pass lane.
Right, yep. Because we've had petitions like this before us anyways with setting up queuing, and we've had to make sure we're not getting into trouble with cars backed up on the main roadways. And so Chelmsford Street would, and I know there are some backups on Chelmsford Street with different businesses, so I just want to make sure that's avoided with this, and based on everything I'm saying, it should be. So I agree with the comments by the board. And since the site plan has been done and approved by planning board, there were conditions that will also dovetail into our decision. So as far as you're here for a special permit and a variance, I think I've already spoken to the variance. I think the variance can be approved. First of all, the city did their review, and they feel that the shortage can more than be accomplished by the type of business. I think also, if I look at a lot of the other businesses that are on that thoroughfare, similar type businesses, most of them have queuing. I've yet to see any of those businesses running into a problem with overflow onto Chelmsford Street. So I think for the variance, the petitioner is satisfied that. The special permit, I think, lends itself more into the operation of the business. How long has that business been there approximately?
Quite a few years.
Yeah, I know it's quite a few. I wasn't sure if it's,
I think at least 10, but
Yeah.
that may not be exact.
yeah, so I think it speaks to the operation there. I don't know if it's the original owner that's been there for the 10 years, but obviously
It is.
that's a very competitive business, so they must be doing something right if he's able to have the capital to spend and expand the business and bring in some, I'm sure he's adding some new employees, which is good also. We don't have any opposition here at all. I don't know what happened at planning board, but there's no opposition here. So I believe, if we look at the economics especially, and the regional retail district that it's in, that this petition meets the criteria for granting the special permit. Any of the board members have any comments or conditions they want to speak to?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I think the conditions that we would be attaching that were by the planning board would be adequate for our approval, at least from my opinion.
Yep. Yeah, I didn't know if there was, so as far as the signage, are we all comfortable with enter and exit, was that satisfied?
In looking at how that easement's going to work, it's actually a two-way access at that point, so signage isn't required.
Okay. All right, could we have a motion, please?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion for ZB 2016-18 for a special permit and variance for 374-386 Chelmsford Street, with the condition that we incorporate the planning board conditions from their approval last week.
Do I have a second?
Second.
A roll call?
Chairman Bailey?
Approve with conditions.
Member Perrin?
Approve with conditions.
Member McCarthy?
Approve with condition.
Member Peck?
Approved condition.
Member Palia?
Approved with conditions.
Member Callahan?
Approved with the conditions.
Okay, gentlemen, been approved. Wish you the best of luck.
Thank you very much.
Yep, thank you. Okay, our next matter before us is ZB 2016-16, petitions a special permit. The applicant is Connector Park Equity Partners LLC, property located at 42 Wellman Street. And the petition seeking site plan review approval for a proposed 6-story building to contain 240 residential units at 42 Wellman Street. The applicant proposes to construct a 452 parking garage and 46 additional parking spaces at grade for a total of 498 parking spaces to serve the proposed use. The proposed project is located in the HRC High-Rise Commercial Zoning District and requires special permit approval with the Zoning Board of Appeals under Section 8.3 of the Lowell zoning ordinance. Mr. Leides.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, George Ciolides Jr., 133 Market Street, Lowell. The thought occurs to me, Mr. Chairman, and I would normally, in this case throughout, I've had my associate attorney, Theodoro, with me. Sad to report, I know it's not Jenner, but that his mother-in-law suffered a very serious stroke last night. The wife found her in the kitchen floor this morning, and so George is beside himself, needless to say, and I just thought it'd be nice for us to say maybe a prayer for his mother-in-law along the way.
Sure.
But that's the only reason he isn't there, and a good reason. And I also apologize for the screen and everything. It's not Mr. Bartash's fault. Apparently, the system in the city here, somebody locked it up and never got the key out. So he was nice enough to be able to go and get a projector a screen, and the chairman was nice enough to give us a little more time, and I appreciate that. So now down to the nitty-gritty, as they say. The folks at Connector Park, and they're most often referred to as the Twin Towers at Connector Park, although I don't know if a 4 or 5 story building really does merit a tower designation, but we'll give it that anyway. They bought that a few years ago. They're in the mostly office business all over New York, Boston, etc. The opportunity came for them to purchase this property. The parcel that's in question is the parking lot, which is down closest to the connector. And they thought it would be appropriate to, at this point, make an investment and do something nice with the lot. They initially thought about putting a hotel in, and believe it or not, this has been on the drawing board from my first meeting on this with Mr. Hawkins, who was the gentleman right back there, the representative of the company, and I met with the city manager in January of 2015 to talk about this. And we all hoped that maybe a hotel could work out, but the city manager told the folks at that point that it was his understanding it's very difficult to get a national concern to come in and take a spot here in Lowell on that location. So, smartly, they went out and did their own study on that, and the study came back exactly as the city manager, who doesn't claim to be a real estate specialist, but indicated to them that there is no call for a national hotel, motel on that site. So they went, by the way, the original plan was part hotel, part residential. So they turned around and said, well, then let's do all residential. The 2 buildings that they purchased and that they've been trying to upgrade and occupy, the 2 office buildings still are not totally occupied. So it's not like they were running around with a lot of people trying to get into their property. So they decided to go with the idea of the residential, knowing that, for example, even though no one knew about Kronos at that time, but knowing that the Cross Point people, for example, were working very diligently to try and get tenants in there, and knowing that tenants in there need places to live. And more about that later. I think what I'd like to do next, if you'll give me the opportunity, is have Mr. Bartash, who, we have a wonderful team of people that worked on this project. And Mr. Bartash did a great job of dreaming up and doing this stuff that architects do that I can't possibly even dream about. So I'd like to just take a minute and give him the opportunity to show you what this project's going to hopefully look like. Peter? We have a microphone for him over there, too.
Those should be on, right?
I think we're good to go. Great. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, thank you. My name is Peter Bartash. I represent Cube 3 Studio. We are the architect on this project. And what I'd like to walk you through is actually the last presentation that we gave to the planning board prior to their approval. And what this is going to do is help you understand a little bit more about the site in detail. It's going to describe how our building plans really seek to maximize the natural features in the site to really help the building be integrated within its surroundings. And then we'll take a quick look at the building itself so you can understand how it functions and what it's supposed to look like. So looking here, this is just a site plan diagram showing you where we are in relation to the Lowell connector. Again, as our attorney was discussing, you do have Lowe's Way and Wellman Street that I'm currently mousing over, and here are the two existing towers at Connector Park. Chelmsford Street runs north to south here, further out from our project site, and our project site is nestled right up against the Lowell connector. So important features to note. It's currently an existing open parking lot. There is a significant grade on the western side of the property and also to the south, which we'll be talking about in detail. It has a lot to do with how we've sited the building and the garage itself. There's an existing system of wetlands that sits up against the connector, and then there's an existing wooded area to the north of that parking lot that's proposed to remain. So now we've taken the plan and rotated 90 degrees, and the rest of our plans will be in this orientation. But here, what we're identifying are those natural features that I just spoke about. This grade represents a roughly 15-foot change in elevation from the existing surface parking lot to the existing residential neighborhood to the immediate west of the project site. So we're up about 15 feet as we move from the project west toward Chelmsford Street. To the north, we do have an existing vegetated area that's mature trees, it's fully grown, and that's remaining in this proposed project. We also have the wetland system that runs again along the eastern edge of the site against Lowell Connector, and that remains. And we do have an existing retaining wall along the south side of the project. And so this retaining wall is a significant feature. It was a clue to us that we wanted to orient the parking garage up against the southern end of the site. The natural grade would help to screen at least the lower portion of the project. We could utilize the garage as a way to gain access into the project from the upper elevation of the existing surface parking. And then, by nature of the grade around the site on the west-hand side, our residential building would already be almost a floor and a half lower in overall apparent height from the existing context. So we wanted to really find a way to make this project nestle into that surrounding. And just for the purposes of understanding greater impacts beyond the project site itself, which is really defined by the area of this kind of colorful graphic you see, Wellman Street and Lowe's Way are actually proposed to be renovated as well in conjunction with the project, which includes extending a sidewalk all the way down Wellman Street to Chelmsford Street, and also completing a sidewalk connection from the project site out along Lowe's Way to Industrial Ave. So the project site itself is only specific to this location here, and the property of Connector Park ends roughly at this location where we transition into a public right-of-way on Wellman Street that's utilized by the existing Lowe's and by these other smaller residential and commercial tenants along the northern side of Wellman Street. And Lowe's Way, in the similar fashion, transitions to a public right-of-way past the edges of the Connector Park property boundary. So we're looking beyond those boundaries in our efforts, working with the planning department to make sure that the project is fully integrated with its surroundings. So here, what we're looking at is the first floor plan. And so the first floor plan in this case is actually below the level of the existing parking lot at the top of the retaining wall on the south side of the site. And the way the project is designed, the parking garage itself is 6 floors, and the residential building is also 6 floors. It's designed as 5 floors of wood frame construction over 1 level of non-combustible construction, it's known as Type 3A. And what that results in is roughly 69 feet, 11 7/8 height to the top of the residential building itself, which keeps it below the high-rise classification and keeps it within the construction type that I was just talking about. But because of the way the natural grade works out and the way that we've designed the project, this level, like I said, is below the point of actual entry for vehicles and also for pedestrians. However, what we have done is located an amenity space for the residents of the project at this lower level that accesses an internal courtyard that is at grade and is available for use by the residents. To the southeast corner of the site, what you'll see is a sloping driveway access that allows for emergency vehicle entry onto an emergency-only 20-foot wide fire lane made of pervious grass pavers that wraps around the eastern, northern, and western side of the project, allowing for fire department access, allowing them to have safe and reliable access to any portion of the project itself. It was a concern that they were specific about and that we accommodated within the plan. And we also have, with yellow arrows here, the egress points out of the project. And so to talk about how the residential building integrates with the garage, they are utilizing shared vertical circulation corridors, and they are working as a single system, even though they are technically two separate buildings. You'll see along the eastern, northern, and western edges of the garage, we are using the residential building to screen the garage itself. There is a vertical circulation core that faces the office park, and that is also acting to help partially screen the garage. And we've integrated a decorative screening element over the primary entry at the level above to, again, screen as much of the garage as possible, but also to celebrate this as the entry point to the garage for most people in the project. The way that we describe buildings of this type is as a double-loaded corridor. So we have units flanking either side of a shared corridor that wraps around the entire project and touches up against the garage in locations where this building is single-loaded. And when I said that the buildings are utilizing shared vertical circulation cores, there are two elevator positions within the garage, one at the upper end of the garage and one at the lower end of the garage. And those are both connected to the residential building by access to the corridor itself. We also have stair towers serving both the garage and the building that are connected across both. In order to provide adequate egress within the residential portion of the building, we do have a stair tower located on the west side and also one on the north-hand side. And this north stair tower at the ground level does actually provide an access point for residents to be able to get to a walking trail that's getting installed over an existing culvert and to a small cleared area within that natural wooded area to the north of the project. So to look at the next level up, on the lower left-hand corner of the screen, you'll see those access points I was mentioning. We have our pedestrian access from the office building, and that is specifically called out because we are intending that this parking could be used as overflow for the office during daytime use, and that shared parking scenario would be coordinated by the owner with tenants of both the residential and the office users. And we also have our primary residential entry here to your day-to-day functions. So this is effectively your front door for the project. This is where you have your leasing space, your day-to-day property manager, your mail rooms. So this is that access control point where we do have most of our foot traffic and our vehicle traffic accessing the actual project. Now, as a direct response to a request from the planning board, we did install a secondary pedestrian entrance on the westerly portion of the site to improve pedestrian connectivity with the new sidewalk and back to Chelmsford Street so that residents could more easily access some of the other neighborhood amenities that are further down south on Chelmsford Street. So that's this access we're calling out here. This is the building section that I was talking about a little earlier. And so the way that this section is cut is parallel to that retaining wall and facing north in the project. So the retaining wall is sitting behind us. And so on the left-hand side of the image, you'll see the existing grade that does sit in between this project and the existing residential community to the west. And you'll notice how we do have our new residential single-loaded corridor that is already recessed down by about 1.5 floors from the existing grade. And when we see some perspectives later on, it'll start to make sense how that all starts to tie together. You'll see that the residential building is tucked right up against the parking garage, and the parking garage is a dual ramp system, meaning that each end of the garage is at a different level. So we've carefully designed our circulation cores to coordinate with those level changes and the levels of the corridors within the buildings themselves so that we can get easy access for residents to and from the garage. If we take a section through the project in the other direction, we're cutting through the northernmost leg of the building, which does sit between the new courtyard and the existing forested area to the north. And we have our single-loaded leg of residential that screens the courtyard from the garage itself, and to the right, you'll see the existing retaining wall that separates the existing parking lot from the existing surface lot up on the upper side toward the office building. So looking at some perspectives, if we were to be standing roughly at the corner of the Lowe's parking lot and facing the new project, what you are seeing is the portion of the garage I just described as being unscreened, which does face this commercial use. We have the residential portion of the building, which is screening the garage and facing the residential neighbors to the west. We have that vertical circulation tower that's primarily for office use, but also provides secondary pedestrian access for residential tenants. And then beyond in this image, you'll see the vehicle entry to the garage with its loading, service, and trash location, and also the primary residential pedestrian entrance to the project itself. In terms of materials, we are looking at a mixture of fiber cement, metal panel, and masonry. Masonry is used in a very key location at a public point in the project, and that's wrapping this public corner where we have our public entry, and we also have our lower common areas at the bottom level of the project. So we're calling that out with a material that faces the Lowell connector. And then we're using a warmer toned fiber cement lap siding that's meant to echo wood to give this building a little bit more character and warmth, and also emphasize moments either at a corner or at areas where the building starts to wrap over that public space. And then we're using a mixture of fiber cement lap siding and also metal panel throughout to then add to the articulation and character of the rhythm of the facade itself. And so here we're moving down Wellman Street, and now we're standing on the Lowell connector looking back at the project. And so you're seeing that existing vegetated buffer in between the connector and the building itself. You're seeing that public space at level 2 in the building and also at the ground level down here. You're seeing that vertical circulation core that faces the office building, and you're seeing how we're using just variations in the way that the fenestration is employed. So the ways that we treat the window jambs, the way that we use trim at the sills of the windows, the way that we're cutting into the parapet to change the perceived height of the building and to start to create rhythm and scale along its length. We're giving your eye things to draw to so that we start to break down the scale and overall massing of the project itself. Here, we're looking as if we're from the abutting neighborhood, and in this case, we've actually scaled back some of the vegetated buffer, and I'll explain in a moment why that is the case, but we wanted to be able to talk quickly about the design of the facade itself. And so here we've integrated a darker color material at the corner to help break down, again, the scale of the length of the facade, but also to bring emphasis to this corner itself as the building starts to turn and kind of unfold and head back towards Wellman Street. And so in this image, right where my cursor is on the right-hand side of the image, that is where Wellman Street is. So you can see that this is facing toward the west-hand side of the site. This is the new pedestrian access point that we were requested to add by the planning board, and you'll see it does have a bridge that extends over the gap between the project itself and the existing retaining wall, and serves to provide access directly from that residential corridor to the surface lot that sits facing the office buildings. And so briefly, just looking at some elevations, what's important to note here is that this dashed line in this shaded area represent the portion of the building that is screened by the physical grading of the site itself. So anything above that line is visible if you were looking at this in flat 2D, but again, as with any elevation, this is really just a representation of the building and is not any way you would ever actually experience the building. And so we've talked a lot about what these elements are and why they are the way they are. And here you may see a little bit more clearly how balconies are used at locations where we have common space within the units. And you'll see that we're carrying that wood-toned material at those common locations to talk about where public space is in the project and to start to create rhythm across the overall length of the facade. Again, the same is true for the north elevation and the east elevation. And what we've really focused on doing is making sure that there's no back side of this building. Really, it does have 4 public faces. And so we've taken great care to make sure that we're treating each facade with the same level of concern as the facade that we view to be primary, facing the abutting residential neighborhood to the west. This talks in very great detail about the makeup of the project, but it is 240 units. We're looking at roughly 10% studios, 55% one-bed units, 33% two-bed units, and 2.5% three-bed units. So there are some more detailed percentages here that do add up to 100. Those are some approximations that give you the general flavor for how that works out in the overall unit count. But we are proposing, as I said, 240 units and 498 parking spaces. So we do comply with all zoning requirements for parking as a function of the project itself. And we are going to actually keep going here and take a look at some images of the building dropped into some street view so we can see how this would appear from Chelmsford Street and from the neighborhood. And we were asked to provide these by members of the neighborhood at some of our community meetings. So we went through the effort of making sure that we dropped our model in and photoshopped these images to the extent that they would most closely represent how we believe the building will appear. So from Chelmsford Street, what you'll see is that the natural vegetation and the grade of the site ends up resulting in a project that, though it is 6 stories tall, it really does feel consistent with the height of the existing office buildings at Connector Park. It kind of fits within that overall height and datum line that's established by those buildings, and it actually is relatively broken down from Chelmsford Street just because of the natural features of the site itself, in addition to the architectural moves that we've done to try to break down the length of the facade. So as you move further down Chelmsford Street towards the intersection with Wellman, you'll also see that there's this very slight corner of the project that is visible to you, but the project is in general screened by, again, its surrounding context. So this is a conceptual view from that adjacent neighborhood. And when I said we had pared away the landscaping, this is the actual greening in that location. And you can see there's just a very small portion of the upper story of the building that is visible from that neighborhood. And so if we were to take that a similar view, but up roughly 30 to 40 feet above grade, you can again see how this project is screened by that existing screening and also by the way the site sits in order to be able to provide just a very small moments of being able to see the building without necessarily seeing its overall scale from any one viewpoint. And again, this is a similar view looking down Wellman Street. So this exhibit talks in a little bit more detail about some of the improvements that were made or are proposed to be made to the sidewalk all the way down to Chelmsford Street, including changes to the intersection between Wellman and Chelmsford, which include new striping for the actual access lanes that would provide a dedicated left-hand turning lane, a new crosswalk system with a new wheelchair ramp across Chelmsford Street. And you can see here just an evidence of the centerline striping that is going to be done to Wellman Street and also to Lowell's Way out to Industrial Ave. And if you have questions about the details regarding this, we have also our traffic consultant and civil engineer who would be happy to speak to some of these areas in greater detail. But from an architecture and design standpoint, that is a basic overview of the project, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Anybody have anything at this point? No, nothing at this point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
So, for an apartment dweller who doesn't have a parking space, I'm very jealous when I see this, I want you to know. And I also want you to know that when I first saw it, I'm going to speak some more on this, but I've never seen anything like this in the city of Lowell before, and I think it's a great thing. But what you need is, you need information about why a residential property and not a commercial retail property. And for that reason, I have Mr. Connery here this evening. I believe you've got a report from him. He's going to elaborate, answer your questions, hopefully, and show you why this is the right thing for this site. John Connery.
Good evening, sir.
Thank you. My name is John Connery from Connery Associates. We're located in Melrose, Massachusetts. Mr. Chairman, could you excuse me 1 second? I'm a little under the weather tonight, so I'm going to take my water bottle with me.
Sure, no problem.
The study that I prepared for the City of Lowell and for the Connector Park Equity Partners has a number of components, but I think by way of preface and context, it's important to point out that It's essentially a very simple analysis. On one side, I look at the costs that would be generated, the marginal increase in costs for a project like this. And primarily in this case, it's schools, because there will be some school children, police, and fire. And I look at the revenue component on the other side of the ledger after working with your assessor, after getting an understanding of the metrics of his income method and the proposed rents that we have, we create a taxable estimate. And it's checked against the three comparables that you see in the report of existing multifamily development in terms of taxable value and the metrics in which they're taxed. My approach to fiscal impact is probably not different than many others, but it is different in one very key way. I don't use national models. I don't use ULI models. I've been asked to explain what I do. It's a departmental analysis based on the community in question. So I use your police numbers, your school numbers, your fire department, your EMS numbers, and your assessed valuations. So I'm comparing not what an office building or a residential building or an industrial building would be in the Northeast Corridor in general. I'm trying as much as possible, yet it's still an estimate, to create something that fits within Lowell today. And as final preface, I would say, bear in mind that what I'm doing is I'm modeling this building as if it were here today. So when I speak, I'm speaking in current dollars, as if this building were built today, and the current operating costs that you folks have, how you can compare it to your current budget. Gives you an order of magnitude. And the little shorthand that's in the report is finally called something as a cost to revenue ratio. Sometimes I refer to it as a fiscal profile. Let me just run through this as quickly as I can, because I'd rather leave it to your questions. But on the general findings, this particular project will generate about $719,000 in annual revenue, current dollars. About 95% of that, $685,000, is property taxes. The $30,000 to $35,000 is essentially excise taxes and the average excise tax. I call that a revenue stream. You have $124,000 worth of service costs, and I want to just explain what those are generally. There's $43,000 for the police department, $49,000 for the fire department. What I did, as you'll see in the report yourself, I used Grandview Apartments, Boot Mills, and Loft 27. And both your police and fire departments were more than generous with their time. They went into their detailed incident records and gave me the total number of incidents at each and every one of those apartments. I use the right numbers here. For instance, just as by way of example, the Grandview Apartments had 57 fire calls and 11 EMS calls for a total of .226 per unit. Boot Mills, and by the way, am I pronouncing that correctly? Is it Boot or Bot? Boot? Okay, I'm not a local and I'm not ashamed to say it, so I'm going to ask. You have 462 units there. You had 27 fire service calls and 11 EMS calls. And I think you can see from Table 3 and the other tables, not to take too much time, how the analysis was put together. And in each instance, understanding that I think police and fire chiefs have driven into me over the years, is they will say to me, John, this is an average and it's a good number, but I don't know what it's going to be next year. It could be 25% below, it could be 25% above. So I add 25% of service cost to the average just to be cautious on the cautious side, knowing that there is a range from year to year. And I think everybody can appreciate how that works. The school costs are always the most expensive component of residential development. But in this particular case, I'll read out the actual numbers. It's Table 5 if you want to read along with me. Grandview Apartments has 300 units and 6 students. Boot Mills, 462, 13 students. Loft 27, 445 units, 7. Of the 1,207 comparable units that we studied, 0.045 was the ratio. In this report, again, to be conservative, I didn't use the average. If I did, I would have had 6 students. I decided to take the highest one, Boot Mills, and use that average and come up with a potential of 10 against 240 units. The actual range that I believe you'll get from this particular building is between 2, am I making that happen? I guess I am. 2 and 10 students per year on an operational average. Taking your annual net school spending, what you expend for each student in the community, is how I arrive at the cost for those 10 particular students. You have an annual net school spending, according to the Department of Revenue and Department of Education, of $12,045 a year. However, your Chapter 78 is quite substantial. That's a revenue source of about $8,800 per student. That will continue. Your actual, the cost per student that comes from your tax base that you support is $3,188. You take that number by the 10 students and you've got an estimated cost of somewhere of about $32,000 for school kids. You put it all together, you get that number of $124,000 I mentioned up front, and you can begin on a gross basis to look at the 719, and what you can see is you have what I call the cost to revenue ratio of 0.17, meaning of every revenue dollar that comes in on this project, if it were built today, 83 cents would accrue to the city to be used as a general fund for whatever else you want to use it for, and 17 cents would pay for all the services. It gives you, in dollar terms, about a $595,000 annual net benefit, current dollars. We also made an estimate based on your fees and construction costs, of about $500,000 in building permit fees that get paid before the construction is completed, obviously. There is the requirement to look at a hypothetical or an alternative development, Section 8.3 in your bylaw. Let me get to the right one. What we selected was an equivalent 4-story office building of 100,000 square feet for a couple of reasons. The primary reason is that is the model of roughly the two existing buildings that the parking lot abuts today. So it would be like the third one in an office park. Also, of course, you have parking requirements for office. The site is a good size, but if you get beyond a couple of 100,000 feet trying to build a new tower or something, you get no place to put the cars, or you're stacked up 8 or 9 in the garage, and it becomes prohibitive. I looked at the valuations that you have in your abutting office park development. It comes out to about $117 per square foot, assessed value per square foot, which frankly is pretty healthy. That's a pretty healthy value for office space these days, in my opinion. That's my opinion. I'll put a caveat on here. This bronchitis is killing me. The value, if you look at the report and you talk with your assessor, I think they'll agree that new construction has a premium of about 20% on assessed valuation. Plus, I added in about a $10 of value for the parking garage. I took then $150 assessed valuation for the new office building, much stronger than what exists on the ground today. That gives you a $15 million assessed valuation. The residential building, based on your current metrics of your stabilized income method, is $45 million. It's a 3-to-1 ratio. And that's an important factor here for you to consider, because you all know you have a commercial tax rate that's higher than a residential rate. But what happens is that when two things happen. When you have a rate that's $45 million versus 15, even the commercial tax rate can't overcome that in terms of total tax flow. But the big difference in this project, why this residential project really clicks fiscally, and again, it's supported by your own school numbers for multifamily, is the low number of school kids, the highest cost component of any residential building, and the fact that 60 to 65% of this building a studio and 1 bedroom. This is workforce housing for fairly high-end anticipated workforce. This is not low-income workforce housing. This is area-wide market force housing. It's very similar to what I've seen in the last 10 to 15 years in industrial parks up and down the 128 corridor, whether it's in Needham or Charles River Landing, or frankly, if you go up a few miles up into Nashua, the Flatley development inside the industrial park, same thing. The idea is simple. We need to attract workers. They're educated. We want to keep them here. We have to give them a first-class space and where to live, and we're going to put them close by. Not every worker in that industrial park will be a resident in that building, but many will. And it helps to augment the value of the industrial park by reaching out to the market area and saying we're more amenable as a live workspace than we are now, which is a straight commercial commuting space. So when you look at the minimal education cost in this particular case, which is due to the unit mix as well as your characteristics in multifamily, which, quite frankly, are the same from one community to another in the Commonwealth. When you get apartments in a downtown area, it's not a child-rearing area. You put them together and you compare this building that's being proposed, it actually has an annual net physical benefit, depending on how you want to look at the numbers, between $150,000 to $175,000 more than an office building in this particular case. But if I was coming in here and telling you I was going to put 243 bedroom units here, it would flip because of the cost component. In this case, it's a totally different animal. You have an opportunity here to provide quality workforce housing, to create a work-live environment in that industrial corridor in a way that is fiscally positive, very strongly fiscally positive. I mean, it's a long-term sustainable ratio. Finally, I looked at the regulations, and I added a section in the report that deals with expendable income. Now, I realize well, I'm getting into economics as opposed to fiscal, but when you have a residential development, there's disposable income, there are expenditures. And in section 11 in the report, I use very simple analysis of the U.S. Department of Labor statistics as to what people spend on food and clothing based on an average income in this apartment. And you would probably get a gross business, even if you contacted 25% of the market area was sold in this immediate area with the so-called retail multiplier, you'd probably be between around $3 million worth of sales to existing businesses. Why is that fiscal? Because as sales go up in existing businesses, it maintains the commercial tax base and value that's based on an income analysis. So it's a secondary plus that an office building, quite frankly, doesn't do. Office buildings are wonderful. We're just not building them anymore. I mean, it's about a 15 to 20% soft market, even in 128. And in this particular case, I think the community fiscally would be very well served by this development. Thank you. I got through it.
Mr. Connery, can I just ask you one question?
Please, please.
Did you, and I don't think you did, but as far as impact on market values, whether commercial, industrial, or residential, what's your opinion of that in relationship to this project?
Well, I think in terms of residential and what I would call a comparative to other multifamily in town, this will be at the high end of the range in terms of value. It'll set a new standard in terms of assessed valuation. However, even saying that, you have to be careful because the other properties have to be assessed about given the conditions that they are. This will probably come in at the top. Its relationship to the office park, I cannot honestly quantify it, but I've seen it happen over and over again. It makes the area more viable for workers if a percentage of them can live immediately in the area. And if that happens, and you can attract better workers and maintain workers, it has a very strong possibility, and I want to be honest, Mr. Chairman, to say only possibility, to increase your commercial value. That's the argument that Newton, Needham, all the projects I work with that are integrating the Needham Industrial Park. I'll give you an example because I've been working on that. They'll have a total of 700 units into the Needham Industrial Park by this time next year. And frankly, they're two 40Bs, friendly 40Bs, because they're knocking down their 10% at the same time. But they're structured as 50 to 60% one bedroom. They're in an industrial park. It's not conducive to children, but the rents are high. The Charles River Landing in Needham, and Planning Department can check this by just calling Needham Planning Department, has an assessed value of $95 million. It replaced an industrial site that had an assessed value of 14. They're making money out of residential, a specific type of residential, one that is non-conducive to families, which this is by design. And that's not saying it's a bad thing, because you have plenty of housing in this community that's conducive to families. This reaches out to a regional workforce. I think it makes you just as competitive as the Nashua site. That's just an opinion.
And the next question I'll ask is, I don't know if Mr. Elides wants to answer it, but I don't think we received, was there anything about what the anticipated rental rates will be for the difference of studios to three-family? Excuse me, yeah, three-family.
Yeah, I have them, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
The 23 studios, which will average 614 square feet, have an average rent of $1,474. The 131 bedrooms of 829 square feet will be $1,907. The 81 two-bedrooms, which will be 1,150 square feet, will be $2,530. And there's only 6 three-bedrooms. The rent will be $2,730.
Yeah, now that you mention that, I remember looking at it. I guess what I was interested in, based on those rates and the comparable rates in the city of Lowell right now for rentals, do you anticipate, what will that do to the rental rates in the city of Lowell?
It's certainly not going to increase the rental rates because the rental rates are based on the locational value of the site.
Right.
This will probably be, if this were in existence today and Boot Mills and all the other sites were there, this would maybe be a 5 to 7% premium on the rent.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Just that I'd ask your opinion on that.
No, I looked at the original numbers. That's how myself and the assessor, we found the comparables. We tried to get something that was close, within 5 points either way, 5 or 10 either way of the rent. That's how we picked the 3 comps.
Okay, good, thank you. Yes, Mr. Elides.
I'm gonna try to do it fast. I want to just hit on some high points. But the one that sticks out to me more than anything else, and I'm no expert on commercial and residential and this and that numbers, although I've done an awful lot of real estate work in my career. But I've also done a lot of work that relates to developments and understand that one of the most important aspects of developments and enhancing and luring people into a location in the corporate world are tax breaks, TIFs as they're now known, and other tax credit types of things. So we can talk about bringing somebody into the city and taxing a building at this is a big rate because they have a big operation or whatever, but what we never hear that much about is the TIF or some of the other things. I'm not saying they're bad, because we want them on the one hand to be encouraged to come into the community. But on the other hand, let's not kid ourselves, because if I'm just going to use some hypothetical numbers. If I'm a commercial building and I'm assessed at $100 million, but I'm only paying 60% of that, then for the first 10 years or whatever it might be, then I'm not paying that 2% or whatever, two times rate that people talk about, the difference between a residential or whatever. In my opinion, I think I'm leading into, these people are putting this property up. They're not asking for a TIF. They're not asking special loans. They're not asking state, federal, local assistance of any kind whatsoever. They're paying the full freight. They're going to put together a first-class operation here. So I'm just going to touch on a few others, if I may, along the way. I did give you an outline of some of the benefits, but you know, it's I think ideal for somebody to live in that location and work at Cross Point. We didn't know Kronos was going to come in. That's a nice little benefit that we hope will bring tenants for this building. It's 1.4 miles to the train station from there. That certainly should encourage a lot of people to be on foot as opposed to using a car. It should also encourage bicycles. It's a great place for Highland residents to downsize at some point. It's an amenity that my poor mother never had, because when she wanted to get out of her house in Belvedere, there wasn't the kind of an apartment kind of place in those days. This is a perfect thing for people to downsize and then also give their kids or other Highlands kind of oriented kids the opportunity to live in the Highlands where they grew up and they were there. I mean, I think we all know that in many ways the city of Lowell is full of provincial people. I'm one of them, and I think I'm proud of it. So the fact that we can keep people around the city is going to be very important. Great amenities, like I mentioned, a covered parking. There is no other residential building in the city that comes close to furnishing that kind of inside parking where you can get into you drive into your building and get into an elevator with your groceries and do everything all undercover and push a carriage that'll take you there. Beautiful interior grounds. I don't know if we talked about the swimming pool in the center of the place. Did you talk about that, Peter, at some point? And a workout center as well that are going to be available. This is that whole live-work syndrome situation. New construction jobs, obviously, a project like this is going to bring a lot of construction work in here, and also new jobs for maintenance and upkeep and landscape and fix the toilets and do whatever is there that are going to all be part of this. So I think it'll be a surprisingly large number of new jobs that are going to come out of this. A great site for people to see the new Lowell from the connector, I believe. I think I drive out in 495 and 3 and these other places and see these huge complexes of beautiful new buildings and say, why can't we have one in Lowell? So that's another one that I'm asking about. We had a neighborhood meeting, and I happen to have had the privilege of, and some people didn't like my privilege of permitting the Lowe's building 10 years ago, and we had neighborhood meetings with literally hundreds of people opposed to the project and what it might do to the area. There's no, I don't know, I think we might have had a half a dozen or a dozen people at the neighborhood meeting, and everybody wanted to know how much the apartments were going to be. It's obviously a huge difference in terms of what the neighborhood is going to be like, hopefully. The money being spent, we talked about, the employees, the huge, $500,000 the minute they pull the permits on this thing to the city, free money that it never had before to work on our deficits and our financial problems. I could go on, and I know you don't want me to, so I won't. So let me just let you finish up, Mr. Chairman, and I have the rest of the team here, as you know, and they'll certainly be glad to answer any questions that the board might have. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right, I'll open it up to the public at this point. Anyone here that likes to speak in favor of this petition? In favor? In favor? Hearing none, that portion of public hearing is closed. Anyone like to speak in opposition? 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 Hearing none, that portion of public hearing is closed. Open it up to the board. Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a few comments to make. I know the application has been through a thorough review with the planning board and planning and development staff. A number of my questions were answered in the earlier presentation. My main concern with the project was just the pedestrian access on Wellman and Lowe's Way and the redesign of the intersection with Chelmsford Street, so that's certainly been answered. I'm only speaking for myself. I'm not in the business of recommending whether a major developer builds a commercial versus residential property. I'm sure if a commercial property was more viable, an office building, then they would have proposed an office building. So obviously there's been more than due diligence done with this application. I'm also very impressed with the look of the building. I disagree with what you said slightly about all of the modern apartments that you see off 93 or 128. A lot of them look very plain, and there are only one or two colors, and the design, the architecture, and I'm sure Dennis will comment more on that, but the design of the building, to me, as a layman, is very, very impressive. So you mentioned the pool. I wanted to mention it, but you beat me to it. But I think that interior courtyard is a great amenity. It's definitely a high-end feature. I hadn't seen, I don't think it was in the original plans, but that walkway out into the natural area, I think, is an excellent plus. I know that the Bruce Freeman Trail is very close, well, if it ever runs through Lowell, is going to be very close to this new development, should it be built. So I was very impressed with not just tonight's presentation, but the application before it reached us tonight. And like I said, I don't really have any questions. I know that the fiscal, the impact study was requested by earlier boards, and there was some talk in the city itself, city government, about whether or not residential was feasible. And like I said earlier, I think, for a large developer to make that decision, they had already done quite a bit of research and due diligence. So let me just double check, as I mentioned to you earlier this evening, all the dead trees that you gave to us in this application. But I think, I'll wait. If one of the other things I wanted to mention or ask, if it comes to mind, I'll just ask the chairman to speak again. So thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Van?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. This sounds like an amazing project. I think these high-end units, if we build them, we'll get those high-quality workforce and the people who are like high-caliber employees and professionals we want in the city. So overall, I think This will probably be an amazing project and very detailed, very developed, so hopefully you get the tenants in, so best of luck.
Thank you. Dennis?
Through Mr. Chairman, I am very impressed by this design, and if we're going to have a building here for residential, this is the one that I'd want to have by far. This is hands down a tremendous asset for that whole location. The way it's nestled into the site, the parking incorporated into it, the green space, the architecture, the balconies. I just wanted to hear a little bit more about the amenities, though, that you mentioned kind of in broad brush about the courtyard space, and I think you said there's a fitness area. The courtyard space in particular, what's the dimension that you're looking at? I noticed in one of your elevations that it seemed to be pretty substantial. On the plan, it doesn't seem to do it justice, so.
Let's scroll
Looks
back
like
to
it's
it here.
about 80 or 100 feet across.
Peter's pretty proud of this, as you might see.
So, to give you a frame of reference, the standard width of this building varies between 65 and 70 feet, just based on its ins and outs. And so, at its minimum dimensions, the courtyard is roughly 120 feet wide by about 140 feet long at its average point. It obviously gets to be even greater than that, but because of the size, it does receive sunlight for most of the year, over most of the day, even though the building around it is 6 stories tall.
Wonderful. Now you'll really be able to support some strong vegetation, full-size trees, that kind of thing. And so you have an amenity of a fitness room or fitness space there as well?
Yeah, so the space that you're referring to is at the lower level, and again, it is disconnected from the leasing functions and from mail and kind of your day-to-day, whether it's package services or any sort of bike storage. And this space is where you would find your club room for your residents, or you would find something along the lines of even a library we're seeing in a lot of these projects. You would find a fitness center, you would find some sort of common kitchen, really program elements of that character and type. We haven't gone through the process of laying out the actual amenity space here, so I'm speaking to the types of spaces, but those are typically the types of spaces that end up in these projects.
And then outside the facility, you have a lot of green space. You're going to incorporate that walking nature trail element. So that wetland area is part of the site, is part of the property?
It is, yes.
Yep.
Yep.
And so you're going to be able to maintain that area as well?
We are. We worked very closely with the city and our civil engineer to be able to manage stormwater on the site, and also to site the building in a way that would maintain access around the perimeter of the project, but also keep the building from violating any of the setbacks for those wetlands, so that they could be preserved and maintained.
Is there a stormwater detention basin on the site?
There is a stormwater detention system that deals with infiltration, and Roy actually can speak to a little bit more gracefully too.
Okay, before we get to that though, if you don't mind, the apartments of this size, typically there's a lot of people that would have pets, namely dogs. They're out walking the dogs. Do you have anything that you're going to do as a dog, run area, or a dog kind of, a lot of them do these days, at least at this scale?
So it isn't something we've formally designed into the plans or have discussed really at this point in the project, but there are several areas on site that could be identified for that use in the future if it's needed.
Okay. And there's no fencing that's going to be around this facility to secure it, that's going to be pretty much?
No, really the points of control are at the actual entries themselves. Yeah, so there are some access security controls beneath the pedestrian walkway from the corridor back to the existing lot, because you do have a little bit of an open alley between the garage and the existing retaining wall. But everything else is exposed. And one note that I didn't mention earlier, the first floor elevation of the residential building is set, I believe, 2 to 2.5 feet above the existing elevation of grade around the project, so that all of those first floor units will be elevated up around that ground level to avoid kind of some of those other privacy conflicts that we've heard of in the past, and also to make sure that those units feel secure too.
Before I get to the lighting on the site, have we eliminated any light spillover to the adjacent properties?
Yes, we've done a detailed photometric analysis as part of the review process with the city.
Great, great. Nice job.
Thanks.
So, can you tell me about how we're dealing with the site drainage without getting into these open detention basins?
My name is Roy Smith. I work for R.J. O'Connell and Associates. I am a vice president with R.J. O'Connell. We're the site civil engineers. With a site like this, obviously it's an underutilized parking lot as it stands today, and there is absolutely zero treatment from a stormwater runoff perspective. That means there's no catch basins. It just sheet flows across that vast parking lot right into the wetlands with no treatment, no detention, no nothing. Under the redevelopment program, we have to meet what they refer to as the mass stormwater policy. And the two key issues with the mass stormwater policy is controlling your peak flow, your volume of flow, and your water quality rate of your flow. The first item I'll take is the water quality. There's no treatment currently. What we're doing is what we refer to as the treatment train. We have parking lot sweeping. We have an operation and maintenance plan as part of our stormwater management that's been reviewed by the city engineer. So we have parking lot sweeping. Then it goes into what we refer to as a catch basin with a deep hood and sump. That removes 25% total suspended solids, is the way the state looks at water quality treatment from a stormwater management perspective. The TSS removal rate required by the state's stormwater policy is 80% removal, or to the practical extent possible with a redevelopment program such as this. We're providing 89% water quality improvement, so we meet that condition of the state's requirements by parking lot sweeping, the catch basins, and then we have what we refer to as hydrodynamic separators, which is a big particle separator, which removes the particulate matter from the stormwater, in which the environmental and the phosphorus, the nitrogen, gets removed in that hydrodynamic separator. And then the final treatment train, the fourth item, is underground infiltration fields, subsurface infiltration fields, and we're providing two of those. One in the surface lot up above, and then one in the porous fire lane that's underneath that thing. One of the other key components of this is we're dramatically increasing pervious area on this site. It's the footprint of the building sits within the existing paved surface. And carving out the courtyard is now new open space. Doing the fire lane is 20 feet of new pervious area wrapping around the residential units. And where we analyzed the 4 storm events required by the stormwater policy, the 2, 10, 25, and 100-year storm events. And we're reducing peak flows in the 100-year storm by 49%. And from a volume perspective, in the 100-year storm, we're reducing volume by 65%, which is well over what's required by the stormwater policy.
Nice job. Wow. That's a wow. I just have a couple more questions about the building. Sorry.
I forgot to mention to him that you were in the business, so he'd have an idea of who he was talking to.
That's this is the project that I want to see here by far, no question about it. The building itself, as far as sustainability or green roofs or anything that we're doing here that's above and beyond what a typical residential development would have?
So I think there are two ways to look at sustainability for a project of this type. One is the life cycle and quality of materials that are installed on day one, and their ability to last and do what they're supposed to do without needing to be replaced or constantly draw new resources. And then secondly, it's the actual performance of the project itself. And so this project will be subject to the 2012 version of the IECC, and the LEED program that would be governing a project like this is actually providing an equivalent standard. So just by nature of meeting the baseline code, the project will be exceeding that code. We haven't gotten into designing specific systems at this point, so I can't say particularly, okay, this one type of rooftop unit will be X% more efficient than is the baseline in code. But what I can say is that all of the systems that will be chosen for this project, and even down to the exterior materials, your use of fiber cement, for example, they have long life cycles. They're highly efficient. And so I think as a whole, you'll find this project will actually be relatively sustainably minded. And generally in the projects of this type, when a developer chooses not to pursue a formal lead application, there's sometimes we can do just a quick checklist to see where we fall. And in my experience at Cube 3, there hasn't been a single project we've done, even just at a baseline, that doesn't meet a LEED Silver certifiable type of spec.
Great. Wow, okay, very, very impressive. The HVAC systems themselves, are you leaning towards individual units in the unit? Yeah, you are, okay.
Yeah, and with it being a flat roofed building, all of the rooftop equipment will be clustered over the corridors on the residential building and fed down to each unit, which will be individually controlled.
Okay. Well, great. I wish there was a better link to the bike trail and a better link to the train station, but other than that, I think you struck everything. So, nice job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Gary?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I want to thank your entire team for the presentation and the preparedness coming into today's meeting and the other meetings. I was waiting to speak to stormwater runoff for the wetlands, and you spoke very detailed to it. Presentation that you walked us through step by step answered a lot of questions for me that I had written down, knowing my colleagues were seeking some of the same. So I think you're very well prepared, and I do agree with you, Mr. Elitis, that this is something that the city of Lowell has been speaking about and touting about, and why not us? And I think we're there, especially with the recent move at Cross Point with Kronos coming in. I think the high-end professionals will be seeking this type of residential housing with the amenities. I'm sure some of the people in the Highlands that were looking for the pricing in the apartments, maybe myself as well, but I think overall this is something that we've been hearing and speaking to in the city of Lowell for 10, 20 years, and to be able to take this parcel of land in conjunction with the Cross Point Towers, in conjunction with the Route 3 and 495 corridor, kind of solidifies us to the future. And I wish you the greatest amount of success. No further questions.
Thank you. Sean?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too want to share the exact same sentiments of Member Perrin, who pretty much said everything I was about to say. He answered all my questions, and the presentation was extremely well put together, answered everything that was brought before you. It looks like it's going to be a very well put together project. And I went by that parking lot again today, and it looks like there hasn't been a car in there for quite some time. So it's going to be something that needs to be done with that. It's going to be I think it's going to be a very well put together project, and I wish you the best of luck. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Total number of employees, full and part-time, what are you looking at?
I wouldn't hesitate, Rob. This is Mr. Hawkins.
You have to come up to the podium, sir.
Identify yourself.
Sure. I'm Rob Hawkins, Senior Vice President with KS Partners. We are the owner of the property. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and the board. As far as number of jobs, there's, I think, two phases to it. There's a construction phase where there would be a substantial amount of jobs. My guess is 100 employees, somewhere in that range. On an ongoing basis, I think I'd envision 5 to 10 jobs here. There's probably a property manager, potentially an assistant property manager. There's certainly maintenance staff that would be on site, but we really haven't gone to that phase yet. So that's.
And these would be all employees, not the construction, Do you have your own, you must
We
be,
wouldn't be able to build this on
Right.
our own, no.
yeah. But these would be your own employees that'll be managing the site, is that correct? Or are you going to be using somebody else to manage the site?
My expectation is that we would probably hire a third-party manager that would have an expertise in this field. Our expertise is really in office buildings. So the maintenance staff, we do have maintenance staff in our office buildings, that they could be our own employees, but I think the property management team would probably be a third-party group.
Okay. So regarding construction, is this going to be all done in one phase, or is this going to be,
No, that would be one phase.
and what's the anticipated start to complete time?
I would say, first, we need to meet with Conservation Committee first, and there's still a full design phase. We don't have construction documents yet, so conservatively, I would say that we're 12 months out from construction, somewhere in that range. Obviously, you don't want to start, coming into winter, so it's going to depend on the calendar as to when we complete construction, get through Concom, do bids, but I think realistically, that's probably when I would think
Yeah,
about.
because we got, Mr. Leidy's, we have, 2 years that something's got to be done. Yeah, so, all right. No, I was just curious if this is going to be started and then see how it goes. It's going to be start to finish before you,
This isn't the type of project that you can partially build. It's
Yep.
not set up where you can phase it. The entire garage is precast. It has to go in one phase. It really doesn't make sense to build 3 stories of a building around it.
yeah, one of the other reasons why I asked the question is if you're going to have construction underway and you only have those 2 ways to get into the site, as you know, Mr. Leidy's, just trying to anticipate, with trucks and people.
Yeah, it's almost impossible to phase this thing, really, because of
Yep.
the size of the site.
Okay. Have you done a project like this before?
Personally, I've developed 2,000 residential units throughout the Northeast. Our firm hasn't developed anything of this scale, so we would need some help.
Okay. All right. So this is a new venture. No, I didn't see anything, I thought Mr. Leidy's probably would have presented something that's been done by your company before. I didn't see anything, so I thought I would ask.
I've been part of teams that have developed ground up, so 2,000 units from Jersey City to Connecticut to Boston, Portsmouth, New Hampshire, a variety of different types of condos and multifamily units.
Yeah. So the term luxury apartments, what does that actually mean?
I think in this case, it means that we provide amenities. We provide covered parking. We provide
Yep.
a great courtyard with a pool and some outdoor space for people. We provide athletic facility. We provide some on-site additional amenities, be it, what's a term we generally use on, what I've done in the past on deals that I've done is we'll do like a rec room where you can see movies and people can rent it and they can use it for functions or things of that nature. I'm not sure what the term is used, but that's the type of space I provide in other buildings.
Is the pool area open space?
It is, yep, it's open to the sky.
So it's seasonal use then, right?
It is, and what typically happens is the pool would be closed down, but the courtyard is still available for use. It's
So
maintained.
you're doing anything like barbecue pits or anything like that?
Yeah, we've
We've
planned for
talked about
several of
that.
them.
Yeah, we've talked about separating an area where we could do that.
Okay. So, Mr. Leidy's, why is this the right spot for this development? What makes this project so unique that, as you know, you need the special permit to get in there? And I'm asking that beyond the fiscal part of it. Mr. Connery did his analysis, but, why is this spot the right fit for this project?
I'm going to go back to what Mr. Paglia said about my comment about the apartments, and what I meant, I'm in the main, I don't like very many of them. They're pretty ugly and pretty standard and pretty whatever. What I meant, sort of to answer your question, Mr. Bailey, and I think Mr. Perrin alluded to that, this to me is a sign of the new Lowell, a very critical piece. We all know how wonderful the Wang Tower is and all of that stuff, but it's been there for 30 years. This is people who come into Lowell now and drive on the connector and see this beautiful, very well-designed new building that is going to be striking. And to me, that's why when I put my notes, I said the modern Lowell. That's what it says to me, and that's very important. It also says to me that you can live and work in, whether it be Cross Point, the Kronos people, or whoever, and be right there, be on the spot. One of my biggest complaints as a lifetime Lowell resident is I don't know the statistic, but I can guarantee you that better than 60%, I might even say 80% of the people who work in that tower have never been to downtown Lowell. So I want Lowellians planted, or future Lowellians planted into this particular location, and I think it's more realistic that they will go to a location like that and that they will become part of the community. I can see them going downtown to not towards downtown, to Domino's Pizza and getting into that whole Chelmsford Street area of retail. So I just see so many other important aspects to Lowell, and what I alluded to before. I don't downplay the significance of elderly, like myself, I now qualify for that, wanting to stay in Lowell, but wanting to find a nice place to live and don't want to put up with a house every day and the yard and the this and the that and the expenses, having a beautiful location like that to go to. Drive right in. There's one place that I know of like that, and there are probably others, on Nesmith Street, the two white buildings that were put in there. One of them has a drive-in underneath garage. They have carriages. The people who live in there can go to the market. They get out of their car, they put the food or whatever it is into the carriage, they walk into the elevator, and they go up to the 3rd or 4th floor or whatever it is to their apartment, and it's a no muss, no fuss, and that to me is a great amenity. So the opportunity for me and other people in the Highlands or wherever I live in Lowell to be able to stay in Lowell and be in a nice place, and then maybe put my kids in my house. If I had kids, I don't, but make sure that somebody else that loves and appreciates the Highlands and the area there will be able to stay there. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, that's, yeah. I guess I'm just, I don't really think of that, having the site there, and I know you mentioned about neighborhoods in some of your discussion points. That's the one thing I don't like about the site, is it really doesn't have a neighborhood setting. I mean, it's all hardscape down there. Now, on the plus side, as this gentleman explained and did, providing the opportunity of having some amenities, and Dennis alluded this to, I see that as a point, but it's kind of like getting people out of there and using, we're going to call it a neighborhood, but that's a high-rise district. It's not really, and I think you'll agree with me, it's not really a neighborhood, because you got Chelmsford Street, and I know you went through this with Lowe's, putting that in there, but that was zoned correctly for that type of business. It's all businesses in there. Now we're putting residential in there. Again, I like the presentation. I like the feel. I think it's something fresh and new that we obviously need. But it's just the point of calling it a neighborhood. It's not really a neighborhood per se there. And that's why I just think about who's going to be attracted to the site. I've heard, empty nesters, I've heard millennials, I've heard this, that, and whatever else. And the work-live thing, I mean, you got to have jobs. You got to have jobs in the area to have people living and working. And this whole state, I'm not here to do the economics of the state, but obviously jobs aren't plenty, especially for people getting recently out of school and having, they can't even buy a home these days. So they are renting probably more often, but as you know, rents are steadily increasing. That's why I asked Mr. Connery the question about market values.
I don't want to get
So there's
too,
my,
I don't want to get too ethereal, but let's
Yeah.
think of it in these terms. I think, when I think of this place, I don't know how many times I've thought of it, where else could a beautiful place like this go in Lowell? There's not that kind of land around. There's no place that I can think of without tearing apart a neighborhood or a place like that. So what a great opportunity to finally be able to have a facility like this and put it in the neighborhood there. That's one thought. The other thought probably escapes me now, but I did have another thought on that subject when I said being ethereal, because, I mean, the fact of the matter is, we want Lowell people to stay in Lowell. That's the important thing. Whether it's a retiree or whether it's a person working at Kronos, we want them living and working and spending money. Oh, I know what I thought of. Is downtown Lowell a neighborhood? I don't think so. But we now have hundreds of people living in downtown Lowell. So maybe in some ways it is a neighborhood. It certainly isn't the traditional neighborhood that I grew up in and you grew up in, Mr. Bailey. So I guess we have to look at the 21st century concept of what a neighborhood is today.
well, I'm not going to debate downtown Lowell with this site, but I think you know as well as I do that the city has tried very hard to develop the downtown area, and there's more and more people moving into downtown Lowell. They have to treat it as a neighborhood. I know you and I can go back and forth about commercial and residential, but that's been an objective of the city. And I'm not trying to compare the two.
Sure.
I could sit here and say somebody's more interested in renting in a mill building than they would be in a luxury apartment. Personal choice. I was just curious what the non-financial factors were for this site. And again, my personal opinion, because I live in that section of the city, that's a hardscaped area. And, there's office buildings and there's retail, as you know. And I know we have a new company moving in across the street, but the neighborhood thing I kind of struggle with, personal opinion.
Understood.
But I do like, what's being offered here. That to me is a plus. If you're going to be living there, at least you have something that you can go outside and get some fresh air and do what you need to do. And I know you can walk from there and visit retailers locally or even restaurants and all the other stuff. So that's my 2 cents. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. I don't think I have anything else on the, I appreciate Mr. Connery's explanation. I had a lot of fun reading through all the details. Obviously, I don't have much to do, so.
I don't usually provide enjoyment, so that's nice.
I know. You only did it for me, I know. Okay. Any of the other members have any comments before I decide to wrap it up?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I had a
Yep.
quick question earlier that I forgot and then remembered.
Sure.
Someone tell me about this drivable grass. There was a package I think that's what you're using for the fire lane. I remember the old Rockwell building across from the courtyard. It used to have something similar where there were blocks in the ground and the grass would go around it, but you could still, it was they tore it up, but it was an interesting old parking lot. I think that's what you're thinking of doing here too.
That is correct. It's what they refer to, it's not a porous pavement, it's a porous fire lane. And so it has honeycomb-shaped concrete cones, and grass grows in between it, and it infiltrates the stormwater. It's an LID technique for porous pavement, and it's good for fire lanes because fire lanes aren't normally used on everyday traffic for pedestrian vehicles, heavy traffic loads. It's used on an emergency basis only. And as you go down, if you look at the arrow that's on that site plan, right there we have an emergency fire gate that we have to work out with the fire chief, the details of that. So nobody can go, a passenger car or somebody that lives there can't drive down onto that fire lane and through. They'd have to crash through the gate and open up the gate. So I'm not familiar with that project that you mentioned, but that's what it is. It's a little concrete honeycomb with grass in between.
There was right in the same neighborhood, on the other side of the connector, there's an office building that had this type of parking lot, and it lasted for years. And I think when someone new bought the building, they tore it up and just put in a regular asphalt parking lot and driveway, so.
It's perfect for this application, for a fire lane, emergency fire lane access only.
All right, thank you. That was my remaining question, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
And my final point, Mr. Leidy's, in regards to Mr. Connery's report, there were some questions that the administration came back with in response to your fiscal analysis.
Yes.
And can you just explain what was asked of you and
I
what
think I can do
transpired?
4 of them. I can remember the first one. The first one, well, there was a couple of typos about the totals. The more important one was, thank you. The more important one was the commercial property taxes as opposed to personal property taxes. You know, when you build a building, sometimes the personal property taxes can play a part. In my experience, they usually range about 1% to 3% of the total tax shield. They're not that high. The interesting thing is some of the most important or expensive equipment that could theoretically be charged in an office building scenario, high-tech and manufacturing are exempt in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts from personal property taxes. So you would have to look in this case of just simple office equipment that could be taxed. And I took we agreed to I took the highest range, and it came out to $14,000 extra that could go onto the analysis of the hypothetical office building as 100,000 square feet. It reduces the difference between them from maybe like 165,000. I'm not looking at the numbers right now, down to 150, but it doesn't change the calculus, in terms of impact. We had the typo, why not estimate commercial expenditure patterns? Frankly, as I explained to Eric, I don't know of an analysis that I could cite that I could feel comfortable with bringing forth using how many lunches people are going to bring from, when they go to an office building, because there are office buildings and there are back office buildings in this world. So I couldn't really do that analysis. I do know that residential development, because people live there, they'll buy gasoline, they'll buy food, they'll buy clothing, they'll go out to lunch, they'll do a variety of things, personal notions. Isn't a matter of case, I've heard 10 to 15 times higher, and I would agree with that. So I didn't include it because I really thought it was de minimis. And finally, yeah, I think you can see the explanation of the typo, and that's about it.
Yeah, well, I just want to make it for the record that, you provided your fiscal study
Yes.
analysis, then the city did review it, and then the city came back with some additional questions for you, which you answered, which I'll give you credit, you answered in the same day. I find that pleasingly.
I work for taskmasters, sir.
Yeah, well, that's good. No, I mean, my point to that is, it didn't take you some time to research it, look into it. You came right back.
Eric called. He was great,
Yep.
and we just did it right on the phone. We were on the phone for about an hour and a half, went
Yep.
back and forth, and then I just typed it up.
Yep.
That's essentially what happened.
But the point of the story is, I just want to make it known for the record that the city did their review of your
Yes.
conclusions. I wasn't presented with any challenges to those numbers, because as Mr. Alides knows, under 8.34, and we've been down this road before with other projects, if I needed to, I could go to a peer review on this. And I believe I need to do that at this point based on what's transpired. So I just want to make that for the record.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, bottom line, Mr. Alides, I think you've met the burden of proof. I know the members express their gratitude to your team that put the presentation together. I know I did a lot of research myself on this, and you know, it's definitely a change for that area, but I think based on the burden of proof that you've provided, I'll certainly support the petition. The only two conditions I can think of would be, obviously, the planning board already did their approval with their conditions. Is there another set of plans that came out of that? Was anything revised based on that?
Those were hot off the press, most
Yeah.
of them. I would,
Yeah, now, we never received, did we ever get the conditions from the planning board?
I believe they were sent out in an email,
Okay, so-
but I do have them if you
All right.
want me to read them.
The next thing is, you have to go to conservation next? Is that
Yeah.
where you're going next? Okay. So we'll condition that based on approval from conservation. Any other matters any of the members have? Discussion points, conditions?
I should say, Mr. Chairman,
Yep.
that we had a long, tough row, as crazy as it sounds, going through all of this. This team not only put together a good plan to begin with, but we had a great back and forth with the planning department. Sometimes it got a little cantankerous, as you might expect with me in there, but all in all, we reached what I think is a very, very fair. This, in terms of amenities, you're talking a huge amount of money that these folks are going to put into the sidewalks, the pedestrian signs, and all of those other things. So it's a very worthy endeavor, I believe.
Okay. All right, so with no other comments, could I have a second? Excuse me, could I have a motion, please?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion for ZB 2016-16 for a special permit for 42 Wellman Street with the two previously mentioned conditions.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Roll call?
Chairman Bailey?
Approved with conditions.
Member Perrin?
Approve with conditions.
Member McCarthy?
Approved with conditions.
Member Peck?
Approved conditions.
Member Palia?
Approved with conditions.
Member Callahan?
Approve with conditions.
Okay, Mr. Leides and your team, you've been approved. We wish you much success.
Thank you very much. I apologize to my friends down the end of the way there that we had to go out of order, and appreciate the opportunity to do that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you all very much. Tell Eric I said hello.
Okay, next matter before us is under new business, ZB 2016-34. For variance, the applicant is ET Properties LLC, property located at 595 Pawtucket Boulevard. And the petition seeking variance approval for 4 parking spaces per section 6.148C, table of parking requirements. Mr. Flood.
Mr. Chairman, for the record, James Flood, 549 Roger Street, Lowell, representing ET Properties LLC, Dr. Elias Nabut, who is the manager, and he is the owner of the property at 595 Pawtucket Boulevard. I've given you all some documents that I think kind of explains why we're here. One is the original, is a copy of the assessor's record as to when the original building at 595 Pawtucket Boulevard was built. The second one was a copy of the zoning that was in effect in 2001, then the zoning that came into effect in 2004, and I've given you an aerial site from the city's records of what was there in 2004, and also an existing conditions plan for 2005. Dr. Nabut purchased the property from the Saab estate back in 2015, and the property included 595 Pawtucket Boulevard, 15, 25, and 35 Shirley Avenue. All of those parcels were part of the original Saab Tower development. He's completely renovated the building, and he's desirous of making the entire building for medical use only. It's 5 stories, originally constructed in 1985. First floor has some parking for the occupants and utility space, and the top four floors are office spaces. He has located his office from Tewksbury to that spot. He's also entered an agreement with Leahy Clinic for two floors, and he's had some contacts from other local doctors who are interested in renting the remaining floor. The problem is that to satisfy the parking requirements for medical use, we need 62 spaces, and all that's there now is 58 spaces. At the present time, it's zoned SMU, and it was changed in 2004 when the city went through a zoning change. The property at 35 Shirley Avenue has now become SSF and cannot be used for parking. So therefore, that's why we are here tonight, to try to get this variance, because we can't use it. It's single family. And I think because of that change, he suffered a hardship, and it can't be used. So we're not looking to make any changes to the parking lot. We're looking to use it as it presently exists. We're 4 spaces short, but as you probably all know, there are also some spaces available on Shirley Avenue. So I think if this was denied, he would suffer a hardship, and I'm asking you to approve it tonight.
So where the bit pavement is, or where the pavement actually ends, it's like a vacant lot there?
Yeah, that's to be removed. The plan shows that's to be removed. You can see where the zone line is. Right there, that's 35 at the end.
But does he own the property that's SSF?
Yeah, he does.
Okay.
And the explanation I received from planning staff was that they did that to protect the remaining residential neighbors from any commercial use. But it was at that time when it was approved.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to argue against City Hall, right? But, I mean, what's the size of that lot?
It's 6,000 square feet. Can't be used for residential either, because you need 10,000 there, so it didn't make any sense to me whatsoever.
Okay. So, historically, when you came before, what was it, planning board originally?
Yeah, we were trying to extend the zone.
Yeah.
And their explanation was, we try to protect the remaining neighborhood, so they suggested we do this.
Okay.
I met with the neighborhood association. They are in support of it. I think the planning board was supposed to send a letter. Did they, in support of it?
Not that I'm aware of, but I know they did discuss their support at a meeting. I don't know if a letter was actually written.
Right. Okay, so that's what basically drove, and how many spaces are we talking about? You short? Four.
Before shot.
Now, I noticed on Shirley Ave, there's, well, it's kind of odd, but there's a sign that says, no parking from here to the corner. And then if you go, I don't know, another 20 feet down, there's a sign on the opposite side on a telephone pole. It's, doesn't even face you this way, it faces like this. And it says, resident sticker parking only. Who's the resident sticker parking
There's a
for? Is it,
condominium across the street, so that's probably what they're talking about.
okay, on the corner of Shirley and, those are condos?
On the other side, yes, Millfall, all apartments, Millfall apartments.
So was that with the permitted parking is
I
for
think the
people
whole
that-
street's open for parking, that's what I mean, maybe the people from the Pawtuckaville can explain it better, but
Well, I was just asking the question because when I went up and down, I only saw that sign for the permitted parking because I went down Shirley and then I came back up and I was looking at the apartments, I don't know why, but, and all of a sudden I saw this sign and I'm like, why isn't it? Then I said, who's getting the permitted parking? Why would it be for the people in the complex
Shouldn't-
that already have assigned parking?
should be open to anybody if it's a public way, but.
So if
I
we're
didn't
talking
see that
about
sign.
four short,
Well, I'm for shot, I have
I
58.
mean, I've seen cars parked on that street before, whether they have permitted parking or not, so anyways.
I think when they really, the city hurt the development when they changed the zoning and
Yep.
took that spot away, so.
Okay, so that's what drove.
That's why we're here
Why
tonight.
you're here tonight. All right, anything else, excuse me, Mr. Flood,
Nope.
anything else you want to add? All right, we'll open it up to the public. Anyone here that'd like to speak in favor of this petition? In favor? Morning, Mr. Hamblett.
Thank you. Yes, John Hamblett, 495 Varnum Avenue, co-chair, Pawtuckaville Citizens Council. So on May 16th, we spent about an hour and a quarter with the planning board. One of the members of the planning board actually was the one who drew the line for the rezoning, worked for DPD. Another member was chair of the Pawtuckaville Citizens Council when the rezoning was going on. So we had all the logic as to why that particular 35 Shirley Ave was zoned a suburban single family. We think this is the best solution. The owner has been a good business neighbor. They have spent, I'm assuming, considerable amount of money to redo the inside. The outside has been landscaped and looks better. I do believe, and this is not meant to be a red herring at all, I do believe Shirley Avenue may have recently been accepted. It was one of the many unaccepted streets. And so it's in pretty lousy shape right now, but I'm assuming it would be upgraded.
May get paved and stuff.
Yeah, once the, and then the only other concern, which is always a concern, is it's in the floodplain and the building meets all those regulations. So Pawtuckaville Citizens Council supports this.
Great, thank you very much.
Yes.
Anyone else like to speak in favor? In favor? In favor? Hearing none, that portion of public hearing is closed. Anyone like to speak in opposition? 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 Hearing none, that portion of public hearing is closed. Open up to the board. Mike?
Just one question and a comment. The spaces that are under the building, it seems like there's room to stack cars under there. Is that how it's currently used? In other words,
I
staff?
don't think we counted it as stacked, I think we counted them as separate spaces.
Okay.
I don't
But
think
they
we
seem, the length of the spaces seems to allow for, in some of the cases, two cars, maybe even three. I don't know if that's included in the count or not, or if we're not allowed to.
He did not include those in the count.
Okay. But I would imagine, and when I parked on the lot and went underneath the building,
Yeah.
you could tell that cars were stacked there because of where the oil spills were, so there were multiple.
I think there's 6 spaces in
Yeah, so there's extra spaces under there that aren't included in your count, so. And I also wanted to comment on what the chairman said. When I went out to the site, I noticed some other parking signs on the apartment side that said, "Do not park on the grass." But then there were a number of residents of the apartment building parking on the grass that abuts your client's property. So I thought it was odd that they didn't want anyone parking on the grass along their building, but felt free to park.
Niagara's.
Yeah, so hopefully, like Mr. Hamblett said, if the street has been accepted, the city will work on, the
Concrete
repair.
Curbs in there, yeah. I mean, Dr. Naboot has improved it. He's put lighting out in the parking lot. He's trying to be a good neighbor, and
Opposition, I just wanted to comment on, a couple of additional things related to the parking, so, thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Van?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, the applicant's only shy 4 spaces, and I think there's more than adequate parking there. And the neighborhood supports us, so that's always a good thing. So overall, I think this project could be approved. Thank you.
Thank you. Dennis?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I like the direction this is going in as well. I think that turning that bituminous pavement into grass and landscaping as proposed in the plan makes a lot of sense. Being 4 spaces short, like my colleague said, I think that original design was for stacked parking, obviously. So in the event that we did have an issue, we seem to have a fallback on site without getting into the street with parking as well. So I think this makes a lot of sense, so I support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Gary?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I agree with my colleagues in the sense that the stacked parking is there. Anytime we can get and keep vehicles off the street, it's always a plus. And I want to thank Mr. Hamblett for coming in tonight and being patient, waiting to speak in favor. Thank you.
Thank you. Sean?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have any questions or comments.
Does he have any plans to do anything with the SSF zone? Is he going to put any, I noticed he got like a picnic table out front. Is
there's
he?
not much he can do there. I don't know what, he can't build there because there's
No,
only
no, I
6.
know that, but I was just wondering if he's going
I
to,
haven't, he has,
yeah, okay. Thought maybe some more lounging area if people wanted to go out there.
could put tables out there for lunch, sure.
Yeah, okay. All right, so I don't believe we have any conditions, or anybody else have any other comments? So I believe, petitioner is, proven the fact that why he's here before us because of the zone change, and we've had the neighborhood association support the variance that's being requested. So for that, I will also approve. And hearing no other comments, could I have a motion, please?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion for ZB 2016-34 for variance at 595 Pawtucket Boulevard.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Roll call.
Chairman Bailey?
Approved.
Member Perrin?
Approve.
Member McCarthy?
Approve.
Member Peck?
Approve.
Member Palia?
Approved.
Member Callahan?
Approved.
Thank you very much.
Approved. Thank you. Have a good evening. Thank you. Okay, our next matter before us is ZB 2016-33, petition special permit. Applicant is Patriot Care Corp., property located at 70 Industrial Ave East. And petition seeking special permit approval for internally illuminated signage according to section 6.3 of the zoning ordinance. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. My name is Richard Westergren. I'm with Point Signs, here representing our client, Patriot Care. I was asked to, can I submit, they asked for the hours of operation. Sure. And I have this to you. So, first of all, we're here concerning the fascia-mounted 2.5-foot high by 12-foot long internally illuminated sign reading Patriot Care with a logo. We have a permit in hand, just so you know, the sign has been installed, but it has not been connected yet. So it's up legally. We just are here seeking the right to connect it. So the only thing that lights in the sign, if you look at the drawing, is the copy itself. It's their individual letters, LED, internally lighted, mounted on a background, so the background does not light. So it's only the letters themselves and the logo. So it's probably like 30% of the sign actually lights. And it's white LED. And it's primarily needed for the winter months when when it gets dark at 4 o'clock. They're open till 7 p.m. Most evenings. And we're requesting if they can have the sign lighted for 1 hour after closing. It's short and sweet, basically. Any questions?
So the plan, and I'm sure we're looking at the same one that's dated February 29th?
Yes, same drawing.
Okay. Okay. If you have nothing else to add, then we'll open it up to the public. Anyone here that'd like to speak in favor of this petition? In favor? In favor? Hearing none, that portion of public hearing is closed. Anyone here like to speak in opposition? 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 Hearing none, that portion of public hearing is closed. Open it up to the board. Mike?
No questions, Mr. Chairman. It makes perfect sense for, in the winter months to have it lit during business hours and an hour after close. It's a commercial and industrial area with plenty of lit signage, so no questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Van?
I have no comments, Mr. Chairman.
Dennis?
Through Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to commend you on your graphics. The sign looks tremendous with the black background and the white letters. And you're saying the hour that you're closing is 7 p.m., so you'd be looking to have the light illuminated up until 8 p.m.?
Correct.
Great. No further questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Gary?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate your documentation on the hours of illumination. I think it's a good project. I wish you the best.
Thank you. Sean?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have any questions or comments.
Okay. So, sounds like the board's in agreement with the proposal. The only condition will be that you gave us the hours of operation. That'll be the only condition we'll impose. Any other comments from any other members? Could I have a motion, please?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion for ZB 2016-33 for 70 Industrial Ave for a special permit with the following condition: that the sign illumination take place no later, be illuminated to no later than 8 p.m. Monday through Saturday.
Right, because they're not even open on Sundays.
Right.
Okay. And could I have a second?
Second the motion.
Roll call?
Chairman Bailey?
Approved with conditions.
Member Perrin?
Approve with condition.
Member McCarthy?
Approve with condition.
Member Peck?
Approve with conditions.
Member Palia?
Approved with condition.
Member Callahan?
Approve with conditions.
Okay, sir. You've been approved. Appreciate your patience.
Okay, thank you very much.
Have a good evening. All right. No minutes to review, correct, Christine?
No minutes. I have some projects to hand out afterwards, but.
Okay. All right. Anything else from any other members? If not, could I have a motion to adjourn?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Have a second?
Second.
So moved.